All right, welcome everybody to the Selection Sunday Bracket Instant Reaction Show. On this episode, we're going to be going over our initial thoughts on what the NCAA did with seeding and the creation with this bracket, followed by looking at some early options for picking games and filling out brackets and some upset possibilities and some betting odds and money lines that I do like. So we're going to be going over a little bit of everything here on this show. It is not DFS oriented, which I know most of my college basketball content is DFS oriented. Don't panic. We are going to have our normal DFS shows later on in the week. But right now, we're going to break down the bracket because, y'all, this is one of the best weeks of the sports calendar. We have a bracket, and we are going to get to see this bracket play out, and it's going to be a blast. And I absolutely cannot wait. If there is any team, any game, any situation that you want me to talk about, please put it in the chat so that way I can get to it. Make sure you get you guys answers because at the end of the day, this show is for you guys. It's not just for me. I'm going to be doing a lot of talking, a lot of explaining, but at the end of the day, this is supposed to be something that you guys can use to get some information, to get some leans on how to pick these games and how to fill your brackets. Now, also, let's go and get all the housekeeping out of the way before we get started with the actual bracket. Tomorrow, we are going to have our full bracket breakdown show with a guest. So that'll be coming your way. Make sure you're on the lookout for that. And then also, we will be running a bracket challenge for the second straight year. If you want in the bracket challenge, reach out to me directly on either Twitter or Discord. Those are the two places where it'd be real easy for me to get contact directly from you. So that way I can get you in this bracket challenge because I'm still trying to figure out what site we're going to do it on. It's most likely going to be ESPN. But if we end up changing sites or anything like that, it'll just be most easiest, if I have direct contact with you. And if I need to collect payments, it'll be most easiest if I have direct contact with you. So make sure if you want to be in that bracket group, bracket challenge, for slightly more than entertainment purposes, then make sure that you reach out to me directly on Twitter or on Discord. So that way I can get you the link and anything you need to join that bracket group. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the bracket. So, a lot of controversy here in this bracket with how the NCAA set it up. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that way we can look at the bracket. All right, so we are looking at the bracket here live on YouTube. So one thing that really stands out to me is that the bid stealers that happened this weekend completely changed the complexion of what this bracket was going to look like. I don't know if we have ever had a conference championship week where we had this many bid stealers. Like truly, UAB stole somebody's bid. Duquesne stole somebody's bid. Drake, you could argue, stole Indiana State's bid. And then you also have NC State stealing a bid, and you have Oregon stealing a bid. The fact that Oregon was an 11 means that they would not have gotten in, considering that the first four teams were all 10 seeds. So I've never seen an instance where all the first four teams were 10 seeds that were heading to Dayton, as opposed to 11 seeds, 12 seeds, or I even think there was one year where there were 13 seeds playing in the first four. So definitely an anomaly with how everything broke down. But what it did was it made the bubble quite possibly one of the strongest bubbles ever. And there are some genuinely good basketball teams that got left on the cutting room floor of this tournament. And it kind of stinks because, there's some teams that, you can make the argument really deserve to be in this tournament, and they're not. And in a normal year, they probably would have been, but this year it wasn't good enough. So in terms of how the seeding broke down specifically, let's take a look at, I got to share a different screen. Hold on. Let's take a look at the net rankings. So the NCAA, they put out these net rankings that this is their system for, determining teams that should or should not get in the NCAA tournament. And to me, it's a little bit of a flawed system. So I'm going to try to explain this math here in a way that will make sense to everybody. Considering I teach high school math and I have to explain it to high schoolers, hopefully I'll be able to explain it to you guys and have it make sense. So the net, at its core, is not intended to be a power rankings where you put everything in this formula and you rank teams 1 to 360. That's not how it's intended to be used. What it does is it spits out a value. And then what happens is because there's no context behind the value, they rank them in order of the value that gets output. So that way there's a context to who's good and who's not good, and it's their ranking, right? But at the end of the day, it's a value. And so what ends up happening is you can end up having teams that are really close in that value that are, span like 4 or 5 teams. Like for instance, I don't have access to the actual values, but let's say that North Carolina through Creighton, those 4 teams were all really close together, right? But then there was a big gap to BYU at number 12. Well, that's not exactly, apples to apples if you want to say that Creighton and BYU are right next to each other in the net when one's 11 and one's 12, but the actual value that is put out is not indicative of 2 teams that would be right next to each other. So the net is a little bit of a flawed tool in that way. Also, what you see with the net is the net factors in margin of victory into its calculation, which is fair because there's a lot of a difference in a 1-point win and a 12-point win, or a 1-point loss and a 15-point loss, right? Like that's fair. But what ends up happening is you have teams that want to improve their metrics, and so they will leave their starters in games trying to almost run up the score so that way they can do as much as they can to boost their net ranking, which is just not fair in my opinion. And so that is why a lot of people have been accused the Big 12 of gaming the net this year, because what ended up happening was a lot of them played very weak non-conference schedules where they beat a lot of teams that are really bad by disproportionate amounts, which boost their net ranking, boost their KenPom ranking, and it allowed the Big 12 to enter conference play with all their teams with such good net rankings that all their games became quad 1 and quad 2 opportunities. There's a little bit of truth to that. There's also not. Like that definitely applies to some teams that played very weak non-conference schedules, but it doesn't apply to others, such as Texas, who went and played UConn and Marquette in the non-conference. There was another team, BYU, I believe, had a reasonably difficult non-conference schedule. Baylor, I believe, had a reasonably difficult non-conference schedule. It doesn't apply to all the teams in the Big 12, but definitely there are some of them that played weak non-conference schedules, and it allowed them to increase their net ranking. Now, what's interesting with the net is this year you did end with the net ranking. The highest net ranking to ever be left out of the NCAA tournament is Indiana State at 29 or at 28, excuse me. So Indiana State sitting there at 28, there's teams around them that are like 7 and 8 seeds. Florida's a 7, Texas is a 7, Mississippi State is an 8. It's kind of insane if the net, is their primary evaluation tool, the Indiana State ranked 28th in the net ends up getting left out. And that's Indiana State, a team that has a quad 4 loss, as they had a really bad conference loss on their home floor. And so the fact that they had that one loss that brought their net rating down so significantly, and they're still at 28, I would have thought that would have been a profile that would have gotten them in the NCAA tournament. Now, if you want to nitpick the net. And here's the thing with the NCAA, the way they set up this bracket, in my opinion, is entirely paradoxical. There are arguments that you can make for certain teams that apparently don't apply to other teams. Like, for instance, if net is their primary argument, then why are Indiana State at 28 and St. John's at 32 getting left out, but yet Virginia was included, who has a net rating of 54? I don't understand that. I really don't. And if you want to say, well, it's because Virginia did have no quad 3 losses, no quad 4 losses, that's accurate. But at the same time, Virginia did not play a difficult non-conference schedule. They did not win any quad 1 games away from home, and they just were able to avoid any landmines. But Virginia, over the course of the season, was a team that was drastically different on home versus on the road. And so I think that personally, Virginia was a resume that should have ended up getting left out, with that net rating already not being strong, and also them having a lot of games that were in their home court that they were able to take advantage of, as opposed to winning true road games in the ACC and beyond. Now, another thing that I like looking at, I personally find KenPom to be the best way to rank teams. KenPom, very much like the net, is one where it puts in a lot of numbers and it bumps out a value, which then is used to rank the teams, right? And so in KenPom, the highest team to be left out was St. John's. St. John's ranks 25th in KenPom, and they were left out of the tournament. Wake Forest was ranked 31 in KenPom. They were left out of the tournament. And then you had the lowest at-large team in KenPom was Virginia, sitting at 69. What's crazy is that you had conference champions that were seated lower than Virginia on KenPom, or seated lower than Virginia in the tournament have a better KenPom rating. Grand Canyon is a 12 seed, they're 53rd. Oregon's an 11 seed, they're 55th. NC State is an 11 seed, they're 58. James Madison is a 12 seed and they are 59. McNeese is a 12 seed and they are 60. So the fact that Virginia made the tournament to me is really the one puzzling one. And I personally would have preferred to see St. John's or Indiana State in the spot in that tournament. Indiana State ended up 45th in KenPom. Oklahoma ended up 43rd in KenPom. Now, while we're here on KenPom, KenPom has a great KenPom is, in my opinion, the best tool if you were going to be betting college basketball or playing DFS for college basketball. It's the absolute best tool to have. I cannot recommend it enough. Go get yourself a premium subscription to there. I'm only going to be using the free tools because they do not like their premium tools being shown on YouTube. So I will be using the free suite for KenPom. This is something that anybody can access. But like I said, looking at the non-conference schedule, the worst non-conference schedules in the nation. There's some teams that made the tournament with putrid non-conference schedules, like TCU 357th, Northwestern 355th, Iowa State 351st, and then you start getting to a host of at-large and otherwise teams. But that is one thing to look at, where I think what the committee should have done was reward more difficult non-conference schedules, reward teams for winning away from their home floor. And by the inclusion of Virginia and really the inclusion of TCU as well, a team that some people had out of the tournament, I just don't think that that's necessarily like what they did. Now, another thing that is interesting with the way the bracket shaked out is like I said, I think that just the committee was so paradoxical. Like there's a lot of arguments that you can be made for some teams, but not for others, right? Like FAU is sitting here as an 8 seed. And I would make the argument that the loss to Temple, who is not good, Temple was almost a quad forward loss for FAU. The loss to Temple should have moved them down at least 1 seed line. And it clearly didn't if they're sitting there at an 8 seed. Meanwhile, well, let me backtrack. That should indicate that the committee did not take results from this weekend into a super large account into where they had their seeds, right? But yet at the same time, you have Texas A&M at a 9 seed and Mississippi State at an 8 seed, who are coming off of great runs in the SEC tournament where they made the semifinals. So clearly they were rewarded for their wins on Conference Championship weekend, but yet FAU was not punished for a bad loss on Conference Championship weekend. So I really don't know what the committee was actually looking for. I don't know what their criteria actually was. I think that at the end of the day, they did a decent job with getting the field right. There's a few teams that I would nitpick in or out. I don't think Virginia belongs in the field, but I do think that for the most part, they did a decent job on picking the teams, but the actual seedings, I think there are some legitimate gripes with. Excuse me. So let me go ahead and snippet off the audio for that section. We are now going to transition into, as opposed to talking about, the actual bracket, we're going to transition into talking about some actual games, what makes for a good upset, what makes for, a team that can make a run here in this term. So while we're here on the bracket, let's go ahead and take a look at some, actually, I'm going to switch over to KenPom. Give me 1 second. So as we mentioned earlier, if you are using the free tools on KenPom, there are a few ratings that you can look at that can help you figure out just what makes the anatomy for a good upset pick, or what makes the anatomy of a team that can go down early to an upset. So I think that there's 2 big ways you can do this. I think that if you watch enough games, you can look at individual matchups. You can look at what teams do well versus don't do well in terms of what matchup they're looking at in the bracket. But I do think that KenPom has a few tools that, aside from just general like looking at the bracket, I think that there's some general guidelines that make teams more likely or less likely to pull off an upset or to be upset. So first off, the history of the KenPom underseed. So last year, we all remember UConn winning the national championship. UConn came in to pre-tournament, they were ranked 4th in KenPom, and they were a 4 seed. So by that logic, they were significantly underseeded, because if you're ranked 4th in KenPom, you should theoretically be the 4th 1 seed. They were not. They were a 4 seed, and they ended up winning the national championship. In 2022, Houston was significantly underseeded in KenPom. They came into the tournament ranked 2nd, and they ended up making it to the Elite 8, where they lost to Villanova. They were a 5 seed in that tournament. 2021, 2021, there wasn't really any significant KenPom underseeds. The biggest one was USC, that was a 6 seed and made it to the Elite Eight, and Loyola Chicago, an 8 seed that made it to the Sweet 16. So the history really bodes well for a lot of these teams that were historically underseeded by KenPom, right? In 2017, Florida was a 4 seed and they were top 10 in KenPom entering the tournament. So is there any teams this year that fit that criteria? Well, two stand out immediately. The first one is Auburn, sitting at 4th overall in KenPom, and they are a 4 seed. I also don't think it helps that Auburn is in the toughest region in this tournament, but according to KenPom, Auburn is a team who has every chance to make a run, and they are going to be Connecticut's biggest competition until Connecticut reaches the Final Four. Actually, until Connecticut reaches the national championship game, if you want to think about it, because none of the other teams that are in between Auburn and Connecticut are on that side of the bracket. Now, also, Duke stands out as a KenPom underseed. Now, I'm very lukewarm on the Blue Devils. I think they have some individual matchups that can really give them trouble. More on that in a second. But they are technically a KenPom underseed. They are a 4 seed, and they rank 8th in KenPom, which means that theoretically, according to KenPom, they would be a 2 seed, but they are a 4. Now, if you want to look for some sleepers that are underseeded according to KenPom, Michigan State is 18th in KenPom, but they are a 9 seed. Gonzaga is 15th in KenPom, but they are a 5 seed. New Mexico is 23rd in KenPom, but they are an 11 seed. Those are really the ones that stand out as the biggest misseedings. Now, KenPom also has a luck metric that I don't know exactly what goes into it, but the luck rating has not been kind to a lot of teams that rank really high in luck heading into the NCAA tournament. And right now, the tournament team that is closest to the top of the luck rating is South Carolina, who is a 6 seed. They rank 49th in KenPom, which is not great. They rank 2nd in the nation in luck. The other, according to KenPom, very lucky teams are Stetson and Grambling State, as well as Samford, and then UAB, Virginia, and Utah State, all ranking in the top 20 of the luck metric. So that's just one thing you can look at in order to look out for an upset. Now, aside from just looking at the metrics, though, what if we just actually look at the bracket and look at the matchups and see if there's anything that stands out for a team that might be, potential to be a giant killer, or a team that might be a potential for a giant to be killed? Well, looking through the bracket, there are a few upset possibilities that really stand out to me. So historically, teams that come into the NCAA tournament not healthy does not bode well for them. Like, it just, you got to come into this thing, you're going to have to win 6 games if you want to win it all. And you're going to have to be healthy. You're going to have all your guys playing if you want to win this tournament. And quite frankly, there's a lot of teams that are coming in very banged up. Northwestern is currently out Ty Berry, and Matthew Nicholson has not played in about 2 weeks. And I don't know if he will be back for the NCAA tournament. This is a team that already did not have a lot of depth. So I think that in terms of a first round matchup, I'm not exactly a believer in FAU. I think FAU is a very high variance team. This season, they've shown the ability to beat Arizona and lose to the likes of Bryant and Temple. So you never know what you're going to get with FAU, but FAU taking on a shorthanded Northwestern squad, I think that FAU will be able to win that first round game. Now, another thing with FAU is I think you really have to factor in the fact that, they pretty much ran it back with the entire team that they had last year. And it's really hard to come off of a long run like that with the same exact team and keep the same motivation, keep the same drive. And, now that they're in the NCAA tournament, now that the backs are finally against the wall, will they finally start playing at their ceiling, which, by the way, is a ceiling that was able to beat Arizona this season. So I think if you are somebody who is embracing upsets, is embracing ceiling, I think picking FAU to beat Northwestern and then picking FAU to beat UConn is a very possible thing that could happen. Is it something that I will pick? Probably not. But is it something that, knowing from what we've seen with FAU, is possible? Absolutely, yes. Now, another team that is not coming into the NCAA tournament healthy is the Marquette Golden Eagles. They have been down Tyler Kolek for quite a while now, and he has this oblique injury that I don't really know what the timetable is for his return. How will it affect him when he returns to the court? And he is their floor general. To me, they are not the same team without Tyler Kolek in the lineup, and they drew a matchup against a 15 seed Western Kentucky that The Conference USA champion historically has been pretty dangerous in the NCAA tournament. There was a streak about 4 years where the Conference USA champion won a first-round game no matter what they were seeded. And so to me, Western Kentucky is pretty dangerous. Like I wouldn't necessarily be super confident in Marquette to win this game or to cover the spread in this game if we don't get news that Tyler Kolek is healthy and able to finish and play in this game. Now, another team that is coming in very banged up is the Kansas Jayhawks. So we do not currently know the status of Kansas's two best players, and that is Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson. And quite frankly, I have no faith in this team to beat anybody if neither of those two guys are playing. If they have one of them, if they have McCullough or Dickinson, then I could see Kansas making a little bit of a run. If they have both of them, I could absolutely see them making a run. But if Dickinson and McCullough are not playing in this game, then that could spell trouble for Kansas. And the Samford Bulldogs could absolutely be a team that upsets them. Samford's got a legitimate star in Achor, and I hope that's how you pronounce it. And I could absolutely see Kansas losing this game in the first round to Stanford if their guys are not healthy. All right, so that does it for the injury discussion. What else could cause a team to be upset? Well, style of play could factor in a little bit for it. And one of those styles of play that tends to be very volatile in the NCAA tournament is teams who attempt a lot of three-pointers. So three-pointers have more variance than any other shot in basketball, quite frankly, because it's coming from a longer distance than any other shot in basketball. And so what ends up happening is teams who take a lot of threes will, quote unquote, you've probably heard this expression before, live and die by the three. And yes, that is accurate in the NCAA tournament. If a team that shoots a lot of threes is hitting a lot of them, they're going to be very difficult to beat. But if they're not shooting the ball well, then that's the recipe for an upset. And so who are some teams in this tournament that take a lot of threes? Well, the leader of any team in this tournament is that in three-point attempts per three-point field or per field goal attempted. So their highest percentage of shots are threes is at BYU. And BYU has a first-round matchup against Duquesne, who is a pretty darn solid defensive team who operates through two experienced, savvy veteran guards. And Duquesne has won 8 straight games. I don't necessarily think Duquesne deserved an 11 seed based off of their whole body work for the whole season, but this is a team who's coming in hot, and I think they could be a really bad matchup for BYU. And if BYU isn't hitting their three-pointers, then this could be a long night for the Cougars, and I can totally see Duquesne winning that first-round matchup. Another team that attempts a lot of threes is the Creighton Blue Jays. So Creighton is taking on Akron. And I think this is a very comfortable matchup for Akron. The reason why is because Creighton doesn't have a whole lot of depth, and they really look to slow the pace down in games for that reason. Akron is more than comfortable playing at a slow pace. Akron also plays a lot of zone, which can be very difficult to deal with, especially for high major teams who don't see a lot of zone during the season. And so if Akron, with this slow burn zone defense, Creighton taking a lot of threes and reducing the number of possessions, if Creighton doesn't have a great shooting night, that could be the recipe for an upset here with Akron. I don't necessarily think it's an upset that I'm going to pick in my bracket, but I definitely like Akron to cover the spread when thinking of the slow game total and the different style of play that Akron is going to be playing from what Creighton is used to. Now, let me finish off that list. So those are the two teams that take the most or the highest percentage of three-pointers. After that, in this field is Charleston, Alabama, Morehead State, Dayton, Nebraska, and Vermont. So all of those teams have a high level of variance, and certainly anything can happen with them because they are taking a lot of threes, and you could certainly see them live or die by the three. Now, one other team that I do want to talk about is Oakland. So Oakland ended up with the 14 seed alongside of Kentucky. I do not like this matchup for Oakland. I was really looking forward to picking Oakland to beat somebody in the first round. I do not think I'm going to be doing that against Kentucky, but Oakland is another team like Akron that will slow the pace down. They play a lot of zone. They are a pretty good three-point shooting team, and they take a lot of them as well. And so they also run a lot of their offense through their center, Trey Townsend, in the post, which is not something that a lot of teams generally do. And so Kentucky is in for a matchup against a team of which they have not really seen anybody play Oakland style the entire season. However, I have been really thinking about picking Kentucky to go a long way in this tournament for quite a while now because of their ceiling. If you think about like the John Calipari teams when he first started at Kentucky, right? Like even when in 2011 when they were a 4 seed, they made it all the way to the Final Four. 2012 they were the best team in the country. 2013 they didn't make the tournament, but 2014 they were an 8 seed with the Harrison twins and Willie Cauley-Stein, and they made it all the way to the national championship game and lost to UConn because they have an incredibly high ceiling just because of the talent and the caliber of players that they had recruited. I think this Kentucky team is very similar to that with Shepard and Dillingham and the rest of that roster. And I think that they have an incredibly high ceiling. And so if all things being equal, if they are playing at their ceiling, they are going to be a team that is tough to beat. And that ceiling is on par with the rest of the teams in the nation. Now, after that, I want to talk about now how to kind of identify who can be a national champion. So, in terms of picking a national champion, there are a few trends that really, really apply. I'm going to pull back up KenPom here in a second. I just snipped off the audio for the audio version. There are a few trends that definitely apply. Oh, I did not want to pick that. And those trends tend to come true in terms of who ends up actually being the national champion. So the biggest thing, and I'm going to go ahead and set the audio back up here. The biggest thing to me when picking a national champion is I want a team that is balanced. I want a team that is effective on both sides of the ball, offense and defense, because generally speaking, teams who aren't good at one of them, that side of the ball tends to rear its ugly head and be their downfall in the NCAA tournament. So who is in fact balanced? Well, UConn's obviously balanced. In KenPom, they rank first in the nation in offensive efficiency and 11th in defensive efficiency. That is elite level. Houston ranks 17th in offensive efficiency and second in defensive efficiency. However, my worry with Houston is they can go through these really, really dry spells like they did against Iowa State because so much of their offense is derived on their shooters, Cryer, Shed, and Sharp hitting tough shots that they just don't really generate a whole lot of clean, easy shots. And so that is why they haven't really reached their ceiling as an offensive team. And that concerns me a little bit. I would rather pick a team who is better on offense than defense if I'm picking a national champion for my bracket or betting on a national champion for that matter. Purdue is also decently balanced. They rank 4th in the nation in offense and 21st in defense. However, if you go back and look at last year, they were pretty much equally balanced. They ranked 12th in offense and 24th in defense at the end of the season on KenPom. So decently balanced for Purdue. I don't think they're going to get upset by a 16 seed again, but you know the potential is certainly there. We've definitely seen it before. Now, after those two, Auburn is a team that we have mentioned already that they are underseeded according to KenPom. They're also a team that is very balanced, 10th in offensive efficiency, 4th in defensive efficiency. And Auburn also plays a lot of guys. Auburn has a lot of depth. That's another thing that is kind of a trend with national champions is they tend to have a lot of depth. And they tend to have guys that, you know, if one guy gets in foul trouble, their entire game plan isn't screwed because of that one guy getting in foul trouble. Auburn and Connecticut definitely fit that description, in my opinion. Houston and Purdue definitely do not. Now, looking down the board here at KenPom, we start to get some teams that are not balanced, like Iowa State, 51st in offensive efficiency, 1st in defensive efficiency. Not picking a team to be my national champion that's outside the top 50 in either of those metrics. Arizona is balanced, though. They rank 8th in offensive efficiency and 12th in defensive efficiency. Tennessee is not balanced, 29th in offensive efficiency, 3rd in defensive efficiency. And I'm not going to do this for the whole list, but you guys get the picture. I want a team who is good on both sides of the ball if I am going to be picking them to be my national champion. And there are teams that fit that, and there are teams that do not fit that description. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get back off of KenPom here for just a second. I'm going to go ahead and snippet off the audio for that section. Jonah, see the comment. Appreciate that, man. Definitely looking forward to this bracket season and definitely looking forward to this tournament. This is going to be a great one, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to pick a lot of winners here in this one. So what I'm going to do next is we are going to go to FanDuel Sportsbook, where I have the lines from, and we're going to look at some teams that we might be looking at to bet to win their first round game or bet to win the national championship. So let me go ahead and pull that up here just a second. All right, there we go. Oh, it's making me log back in. Hold on. So we do have the lines here on FanDuel Sportsbook, and we are going to be looking at the betting lines for the initial games. So let's start it off with the first four. So the first four, to me, when you have these 16 seeds that are playing, those games tend to go over. And it's not because it's necessarily good basketball. It's because these teams tend to be better on offense than they are on defense. And so I would really happen to think that the Wagner and Howard game, Wagner really slows the pace down. Howard does not. Because of the slow pace that Wagner plays, I probably would not be inclined to take the over in this one. But the Grambling Montana State one, I definitely would be inclined to take the over for, just because those two teams I don't think play a whole lot of defense. Now, it is interesting to me that Colorado State is the favorite over Virginia, and the total sits at 120. Virginia has not been very successful this season away from home, and I would absolutely be inclined to pick against Virginia in this game. I have a vested personal interest in this game, as the winner of this game will play my Texas Longhorns. So personally, I would rather see Virginia win, because I think Texas will be able to score more than 50 points against Virginia, and they'll be able to win that game. This would be one where I would certainly be inclined to take the under. I would also be inclined to take Colorado State minus the points. Ken Palm very much supports Colorado State minus the points as well. Now, if we look at the actual first round games, there are a few lines that stand out to me. So the first one is, we already mentioned this one. I think Akron is going to be able to cover against Creighton. This line has already been bet down. It opened higher than 14 or higher than 12.5, and now it is 12.5. And so this is one I'd definitely be inclined to bet, because Akron is going to slow the pace down. They're going to play that zone that Creighton's not used to. Creighton's going to be willing to play slow as well. I just don't see that being a big time margin of victory. Now, another one that I am big on is, I think Oregon is going to be able to beat South Carolina. I think Oregon, you can make an argument that they should be favored in this game, and they're 1.5 point dogs. Oregon is one of the hottest teams coming into the tournament, coming off of that Pac-12 championship run, and they have Nafali Dante down low, who I think is personally just a bad matchup for BJ Mack. And I just really, really think Oregon's going to be able to get this one done. I think let me rephrase. I think Nafali Dante could give the same problems to the South Carolina front court that Janai Broome did in the SEC tournament. And so I think that is going to be a matchup where Oregon is going to be able to come on top. One that really intrigued me. Now, I have a vested personal interest in this one too, because my dad went to the University of Dayton. But Nevada at Dayton. Dayton is the higher seed, and Ken Palm has them ranked higher. And they are underdogs against Nevada by 1.5 points. I really like the Flyers in this one. Now, like I said, I'm a little bit biased. I got to admit that. But let's think about like the specifics here, right? Nevada's a team in the Mountain West. The Mountain West, aside from San Diego State's run last season, had not won a tournament game since 2018. That's not good. This was a conference who had very little success in the NCAA tournament in recent memory until San Diego State's run last season. This season, as much as people like to say that the Big 12 manipulated the net, the Mountain West kind of did the same. They had multiple instances of their teams going and beating the same team in non-conference play. 2 of their teams beat Creighton, 2 of their teams beat Washington, and I believe 2 of their teams beat TCU as well in the non-conference. And those non-conference wins, along with San Diego State scheduling one of the hardest non-conference schedules in the nation, allowed the Mountain West to come in with a really solid net rating before conference play even started. And the top 6 teams in the Mountain West were essentially getting a quad 1 opportunity in the net every time they played each other, which benefited all of their resumes greatly. And so I think that the Mountain West, it's time to put up or shut up this year in this tournament. Are you actually a legitimate conference that is up there with the Power 5 or Power 6 conferences, or are you just another mid-major conference that managed to figure out how to have a really good year in the net because of a few non-conference wins and a few competitive league games? And so I really like the Flyers in this one. I do not think I'm going to be big-time betting on the Mountain West schools. I know that I mentioned Colorado State to take Virginia in the first 4, but I obviously aren't going to be picking Colorado State to beat my Texas Longhorns in round 2 either. So another spread that I like McNeese to cover 6.5 against Gonzaga, simply because I trust McNeese and I trust Will Wade. I think Will Wade is a heck of a basketball coach. You can say what you want about his recruiting tendencies, his potentially criminal acts, but I think he's a heck of a basketball coach, and I think he's going to have these guys ready to play. There are a few high major transfers on this team, like Shahada Wells from TCU, who are really good, and they belong on the court in a game like this against Gonzaga. And so I think that even if McNeese doesn't win, I like their chances to cover 6.5. And these are two teams that rank out really well in KenPom. KenPom has this line about it the same as Vegas does. So, not really going to get a lean from that one way or the other. But just knowing what I know about McNeese State, I think that these guys are going to come ready to play. They're not going to be super out-talented by Gonzaga. I definitely like that line of 6.5 points for them. Now, another team that we got to talk about, we've kind of already talked about this already. I like Stanford plus 7.5 against Kansas. Kansas is banged up. I just don't see that happening. I just don't see that Kansas, if they're not fully healthy, winning that game. Now, another line that I like. So Colgate is a team who has made 5 straight NCAA tournaments now. And every time they have made it, they have been a team who has been really good to target in DFS because they play at a fast pace. They take a lot of threes. They are not the most athletic team, but they will play very quick possessions, and they will generally play a high-pressure defense that allows you to take a lot of quick shots as well, which increases the number of possessions. They have also represented themselves pretty well every time in the NCAA tournament. They've been a team that hasn't really gotten involved in a massive blowout when they've been in it. They've been close to pulling off an upset a few times. So I don't know right now whether I like more them to cover 13.5 or to just take the over in this game, Colgate against Baylor. But I definitely like Colgate to put up a lot, and I think Baylor's going to put up a lot of points on them as well. But I definitely think that Colgate lends itself to a good game environment, and that total of 138.5 I see as being a little low, and I will absolutely take that one. Now, the most interesting line to me on FanDuel Sportsbook is New Mexico and Clemson. New Mexico as the 11 seed, 2.5 point favorites. That is not something you see very often. And usually when you see that, that is a dead giveaway that you need to be picking that 11 seed. It just generally speaking, the most recent example I can think of is 2 years ago, you had Michigan as an 11 favorite over Colorado State, and that one ended up winning. And so I definitely think that New Mexico over Clemson, if they stay favored in this game, if the line doesn't move, that's a game that you definitely have to keep an eye out on. That generally that 11 favored over 6 ends up happening when it is there. All right, so in terms of the individual games, I believe that is all that I wanted to look at. I did want to kind of look at some odds for a national champion. So I think that there are obviously this is like a shot in the dark bet, right? But if you're going to be betting this, bet a team that has a legitimate ceiling. Bet a team who has beaten some other good teams this year. Bet a team who is going to, have a pretty good setup for them. So personally, I think UConn at plus 420 is as much as I like UConn, as much as I may actually pick them to win it in my bracket, I would not be taking that bet at plus 420. I think they got stuck with the hardest region. They have an 8 seed in FAU who has been to the Final Four and beaten Arizona this season. That's a dangerous 8 seed. They have a 4 seed in Auburn who is KenPom's 4th overall team. They have a 2 seed in Iowa State who just knocked off Houston by 30 points and is playing some really good basketball right now. So I just think that they got dealt a really tough hand in their region. And as good as I think UConn is, it's really hard to repeat. And plus 420 is not a lot of odds at all. I don't think that is a particularly great bet here at this moment in time. All right, so I believe that does it for the bracket show. I believe we got to everything that I wanted to cover. We got to talk about the actual seedings of the tournament. We got to talk about some early leans for, betting the first 4 games and beyond, as well as kind of what makes the anatomy for an upset or a team that's about to get upset. So we're going to go ahead and kind of wrap it up there. Jonah, I see in the comments that you're a KU fan. Sorry for picking against your team there. If I knew that you had Dickinson and McCullough healthy, I would be pretty confident in Kansas to win that game. But I don't know what the status of either of those two guys is going to be. If Dickinson is back, I got to think they're going to at least get out of round 1, but I really think they're going to need both of those guys if they want to make any kind of run. And if they don't have either of those guys, then they're just going to be going up a creek without a paddle. So I really want to know the health status of those two guys before I fill out my bracket. And I really think that as a KU fan, if you have those two guys, you got to feel pretty good about your draw. But if you don't, it's not a good situation to be in. All right, so quick reminders before we wrap it up here today. We will have the full bracket breakdown show tomorrow with a guest where we are going to talk about, how to fill out a bracket to win a bracket pool. I'm going to be making my official picks for the full bracket on the show tomorrow. So make sure you are here for that. It won't be a live on YouTube. It will be recorded and posted later. But if you're subscribed to the channel, you will get notified when that happens. And then also we'll be here all week talking about DFS content as well as the bracket breakdown show on Monday. So just make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You'll be with us all week and for all the NCAA tournament. I'm really looking forward to this one. This one's going to be a blast, and I cannot wait for it to get started. Believe it or not, I'm a North Carolina native, and my Texas Longhorns are playing in Charlotte. So I'm going to figure out a way to see if I can go to that game on Thursday and hopefully have a lot of fun doing that. So, Anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up there. Before you leave, do me a big favor. Please hit that like button if you like what you saw here in the show, if you like what we do here at the channel. Come on back. Hit that subscribe button. Be back with us for the bracket breakdown tomorrow. Come back with us for the DFS shows later on in the week. And if you want to be a part of the bracket pool, this is your chance. DM me on Twitter or Discord. Reach out to me and I will find a way to get you in this bracket pool. But I want to make sure that everything is on the up and up in terms of legality wise and in terms of what site we're on. So if you reach out to me directly, I will make sure that there is a spot for you and that you will get in. If you do not, then there's no way I have to contact you. There's no way that any of it can happen. So reach out to me directly if you want to be in the bracket pool. And other than that, that's pretty much all we got for this show, guys. Got to talk about everything we wanted to with the brackets. Really looking forward to this week. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up there. So like I said, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you are with us for the rest of the tournament. Thank you guys for watching to this point, and I will see you guys next time.